1 in 2 employees reports high exhaustion. The wider the gap between what AI can do and what people can absorb, the more of AI's potential value isn't captured. And so the most forward-thinking leaders are asking themselves how work should be redesigned so that AI and humans can complement each other.
That's Jackie Brassey, McKinsey Senior Fellow. She's talking about how leaders can manage AI-driven change that leads to anxiety and fatigue. She joins me and McKinsey partners Erica Ko and Kana Enomoto to share a framework executives can use to help safeguard their employees' brain health while they rewire for AI. And stick around for a second segment today. We answer questions you sent us about how to create organizational resilience in the face of global trade tensions. This is the McKinsey Podcast, where we help you make sense out of the world's toughest business challenges. I'm your host for today, Lucia Rahili.
Humans have already been through quite a bit of disruption in recent years. Your research estimates already that the global economy loses something like 12 billion working days each year to mental health challenges. Talk to us about the context here and about what's really at stake. Erica, let's hear from you.
Technology is promising productivity gains, but if we don't have healthy and adaptable human brains, the gains are not going to be realized or materialized. And if we look at our current state, we have a lot of unaddressed disease burden. As you mentioned, we have 12 billion working days lost each year to mental health challenges, and that's probably an underestimate. We also have this value at stake of if we really were scaling interventions we knew worked, we would have 6.2 trillion additional global GDP contributed. That's how much of a gap in disease burden there is. With AI becoming automated, we need to be relying ever more on things that are really uniquely human: judgment, creativity, adaptability, resilience. But there's a way that we can strengthen that if we really address this growing tension head on, that just as we are asking more of our brains, we're underinvesting in them, and people don't feel that they're necessarily at their best to lean in.
Talk to us about brain capital, why it's fast becoming an important concept in this AI era, including the relationship between brain health and the skills that folks need to thrive.
We put out some new research recently as McKinsey Health Institute in collaboration with World Economic Forum and a number of other global partners. And it talks about this framework of brain capital, the combination of brain health and brain skills. And I think what is novel about this approach isn't the concepts themselves, but it's the looking at both sides of the coin. Right? Brain health matters, and we need that strong foundation to be able to learn new skills. You can't cultivate all of these skills that are becoming increasingly more important with the rise of AI on a foundation of burnout or cognitive overload. And so you really have to have both together. The more that society changes, the more important brain capital will be as a competitive advantage and is something that is worth investing in. And so we found that by recognizing that as an asset that matters at an organizational and a societal level, that it can start to make a difference. And it really gives us a way to think about both sides of those equations, how we protect and strengthen brain health while we're also developing the skills that people need to thrive in a changing world.
So where should leaders focus their efforts most productively when thinking about brain capital? Kana, let's hear from you.
We partnered with World Economic Forum to better understand the science and the policy in this space. And we published a report, which we released in January of this year, outlining a fairly practical framework for strengthening brain capital in the age of AI. And we identified these 5 critical levers: safeguarding brain health, fostering brain skills, and then studying, investing in, and mobilizing to build brain capital. And while all 5 levers are, of course, important, the framework starts with safeguarding for a reason, because brain health is the foundation that we all need to learn, to perform, to thrive, to adapt, to fall in love, make friends, etc. In order to achieve lasting progress, we need to have better measurement. We need to have intentional, synergistic investment, and of course, coordinated action across sectors. This isn't a private sector thing. This isn't a public sector thing. It's not a health thing. It's not a commercial thing. Everyone, we have to be working together. Building brain capital requires contributions from employers, from healthcare, educators, governments, built environment, investors, communities, etc. We are increasingly seeing people paying attention to this issue, wanting to work together, coming together in important ways to galvanize the kind of change that we need to see. Where in the last 6 months, it's been Davos, World Health Assemblies, G7, G20. This is a topic that is rising on the minds and the hearts of CEOs and global leaders alike.
Let's get a little more specific here. What does it really look like or mean to safeguard brain health?
We identified 3 foundational actions that leaders, systems, countries can take. And the first action is to support the promotion of healthy brain function and the prevention of brain health conditions or brain dysfunction. And the evidence shows that prevention can and does work. So, for example, research suggests that about 85% of the global health impact of stroke is causally linked to modifiable risk factors. So this include things like high blood pressure, exposure to air pollution, unhealthful diet, sedentary lifestyles, and alcohol use. And in the US Pointer study that was released in 2025, in particular, it highlighted the benefits of combined lifestyle interventions that are basically within reach for almost all of us. The second action is to scale access to evidence-based treatment and services for brain health conditions. There is amazing advances in technology and in science, and yet some of the most impactful interventions that we already have access to are quite simple. And we're really excited about the growing use of task sharing in both health and brain health care, and where trained community workers, other non-specialist providers can deliver evidence-based interventions to populations where they live, work, and play. So research shows that this can substantially expand access to care in a wide range of both geographies, economies, and settings. And the third action is to innovate to advance promotion of brain health and treatment for brain disorders. And we need advancement. So while we already have some great tools, we need more. We need to understand better how we can promote mental and neurological health using precision medicine, using public health and social interventions. We need to understand how to prevent disease and treat disease in ways that are affordable, accessible, and effective. Equally important, innovation should be shaped in partnership with the people and the communities that we want to serve.
Let's pull back a little bit now. Human capabilities are rising in importance, as you're describing, just at a moment when humans and our emotional and cognitive faculties are under unusual levels of duress. Jackie, talk to us about how leaders can navigate that tension in order to help their employees develop these increasingly vital capabilities.
What we see is that there is really a paradox playing out. Leaders are really, on the one side, managing so many complex demands, right? They also are racing to implement and scale AI. And at the same time, what is happening, the employees in the organization are starting to burn out. And AI increases cognitive demand faster than human capacity actually can keep up with, because work is shifting from execution to judgment. It's less about doing the task and much more about interpreting, prioritizing, and deciding. And we see that in the data. 1 in 2 reports high exhaustion. What leaders often miss is that the bottleneck usually isn't the technology, it's human capacity. And that shouldn't be an afterthought. And so I think that sometimes you can talk about it like a value leakage. The wider the gap between what AI can do and what people can absorb, the more of AI's potential value isn't captured. And so the most forward-thinking leaders are asking themselves how work should be redesigned so that AI and humans can complement each other. The goal is not to make AI more human, but it is to free people to focus on the things that humans do best. And that's why we're talking today about fostering brain skills and brain capital, as organizations need to help develop the capabilities that allow people to work alongside AI. And so they can create value that neither humans nor technology could generate alone.
Jackie, you do tons of work with senior executives. If you were advising a CEO or, say, a leader of a large team, what would brain positive leadership, quote unquote, look like?
In our research, we use holistic health and burnout symptoms. And burnout symptoms is actually a measure of brain strain. There are very interesting mentions under that. And that gives you a baseline, which helps you understand and track your hotspots in your organization that need extra attention. And then you design around it. We've defined 5 principles to design AI transformation in support of brain capital. So the first one is about calibrating cognitive load. And that is really about the demand side. It's about designing what the brain is asked to do. So as AI changes the nature of work, balance complex and cognitively demanding tasks with opportunity for learning and recovery and lower intensity work. The second one is about protecting cognitive capacity, which is the supply side, I could call it, which is about protecting what the brain has to give. Of course, both are correlated, but has a different perspective, right? And this is about ensuring that people have sufficient opportunity for recovery and build that into the operating rhythm. Third one is about enabling focus, which is about creating space and for concentration and deep work and sound judgment. The next one is about building adaptive brain skills, continuously develop those skills that people need to thrive alongside AI, such as critical thinking, creativity, adaptability, and judgment. And the last one is about the environment that we create. Is it a brain positive environment? And that is both the hardware and the software. One misconception is that AI automatically reduces workload, but often AI removes routine work whilst increasing complexity of what remains. And so the volume of work may decrease, but the cognitive load can increase significantly. And so leaders need to design actively for that reality, which means balancing cognitively demanding work with activities that require less mental intensity, creating opportunities for recovery and avoiding situations where employees spend their entire day making high-stakes decisions.
Excellent. It sounds like, cognitive sprinting all the time and how to manage for that. Let's bring this to a close and end where we began with value. Erica, again, leaders are in a tough operating environment. They're under pressure. Why should they think about brain capital as an investment rather than just an additional cost?
For all the reasons we've talked through, it's more natural and intuitive for organizations to be investing heavily in technology and infrastructure and capital assets because those are very kind of direct, tangible investments that drive performance. But brain health should be viewed through the exact same lens. We know that it's shaping performance. As Jackie was saying, we know that human capability is the line definer right now. And if we're not investing in growing that, that's going to hurt performance, or that's going to be the reason that gives us opportunity. We've seen from our research that there's a huge ROI on mental health interventions. And I think it's also important that we remember it's much bigger than an investment in the workforce. This is a question of individual thriving all the way to societal resilience. And it matters across ages. How are we investing in this concept in brain health and brain skills for ourselves, for our families, and certainly for our workforces?
This was a great discussion. So grateful to all three of you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And now the leader of the McKinsey Global Institute, Shubham Singhal, on how to make good trade decisions in the midst of geopolitical churn. Shubham, thanks for joining us today. We had so many audience questions following our recent conversation on geopolitics, which was based on your McKinsey Global Institute report, Geopolitics and the Geometry of Global Trade. And we'll answer a few of those questions today. First question. Your research shows that trade grew to record highs in 2025, even as geopolitical tensions reconfigured the shape of trade, its geometry, as you call it. We've heard so much, Shubham, about deglobalization. Is that what this is in your view, or is this simply a power shift?
It's a great question, and I get this all the time. It's important to understand that we don't have deglobalization at this stage. What is distinctly happening is, even as trade grew, the geopolitical distance of trade shrank, which means countries whose foreign policies don't align are trading less with each other. So that is definitely the case. And people need to plan around that. Second, it is important to recognize that AI is a big driver in the build out of the infrastructure at a minimum in boosting globalization. And number three is that countries are also setting in place free trade agreements. Examples like EU and Mercosur, EU and India. These were trade deals that have been talked for years and now got done. Just think about it as a rewiring of global flows, not a deglobalization agenda.
We have a question from an audience member on how AI factors into these changing geopolitical dynamics, and specifically, does AI have a democratizing effect on this new order, or does it simply create a new form of technological dependency?
It's a very good question. It is shifting every day as we speak, and it is contested. Short answer is nobody knows. So even if you roll back before AI, we are already moving towards two things we've seen happening. One, moving towards a China stack and a US stack for technology. And AI is kind of following that so far as well. The second part of it that we are also seeing is more and more countries asking for data localization. Now, I wouldn't just call that and roll that forward. While that is playing out, there is a lot of discussion on open source, open weight models for AI. And those may not be dependent on any one stack, for example, ultimately. At this stage, it is moving much more towards where there will be siloed stacks. But I think beyond US and China, the rest of the world will get to have a say, particularly as we get beyond this initial burst, and particularly as we get to open source and open weight, and we'll see where we land.
Okay, and we have a question that picks up on the point that you made at the top about geopolitical distance. We hear so much about shifting supply chains to quote unquote friendly countries, but that is obviously a big undertaking. It's expensive, it can take years. How worried should leaders be about rushing to reconfigure their manufacturing supply chains right now?
I think there's three things that I would say on that. One is geopolitical distance. The total doesn't matter. What matters is what is it for your category. We at MGI have a report on what we call the Achilles heel. So if you break down the totality of the spend or imports that countries have, only 11% of that comes from geopolitically distant trading partners globally. If you break it down to the US, just to make it real, it's 13%. So US has $3 trillion of imports, only 13% fall into that bucket.
Okay, now if you add to that what the report refers to as dependencies, so geopolitical distance, as we just discussed, national security, supply concentration, how are imports affected?
If you added to that and said, are they also concentrated and are they critical to the US, that number falls to 5%. And then if you just looked at it from two dependencies between critical, geopolitically distant partner and strategic to the country, that's 25% of the total, $750 billion for the US, right? And roughly for the world, it's in the similar zone. So one thing I'd say to executives first is understand if your category fits that. Because if it fits that, then governments will take action in national interest to try to move them either to friendly countries or to move them onshore. And with that will come industrial policy. The industrial policy incentives have gone up in EU and the US in the last 5 years. As a business, you would lean into those and work with your government to figure out how you can access those incentives. And those incentives make your business case of moving far better. And it's not just the financial incentives, it's the accelerated permitting, making it easier to acquire land in many places in other countries we've seen, et cetera, et cetera. And all those industrial policy incentives become ways in which you can improve your financial case. So that's one part if you're in that bucket. If you're not in that bucket, you should largely make your decisions based on where you're going to be most competitive on an economic basis. Because countries are not going to lean into that most likely to try to move those supply chains. I mean, maybe it can happen, but it is generally not going to be high on the list of countries to figure out how to move t-shirts and handbag production. And then there's a third part that I would say, which is a lot of companies that are global, or at least operate in multiple markets and have multiple production sites around the world. To the point I made earlier about free trade deals being created, if you operate in the EU and if you can work within the free trade agreements that the EU has, you're back to being in a pretty efficient place. So how do you think about your global footprint or your multi-country footprint and how you use that to build resiliency, where you produce and where you ship, and how you create your operations to be agile, as we like to say, move faster, to readjust as the realities change, also gives you resilience without adding cost.
Okay, one more. Our data shows that the current realignment has been building for nearly a decade. Do you view these new trade and financial flows as secular changes or as cyclical movements?
If it is in national interest, at this point, you should just pretty much create a view that says this is pretty secular. That's the simple way to look at it. Now, that's at a country level. You can get into national interest on these Achilles heels of categories, semiconductors, rare earths, magnets, etc. I mean, you will have a series of categories. Biopharma. See, if you're in those places, you should start to realign and understand that there is national interest that will move that and then, kind of view this as durable. Other areas will be more volatile. And so you have to design for being agile around them, much more so than structurally shift your business.
Fantastic. Shubham, we appreciate you following up with our audience.
It was lovely to capture some of the questions and go deeper in a few areas. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the McKinsey Podcast. I'm Lucia Rahili.
And I'm Roberta Fasaro.
Find us on McKinsey.com. We'll have a transcript of this episode up shortly.
And if you have any questions based on this episode, please email them to us at the McKinsey Podcast at McKinsey.com.
If you enjoyed the show, we'd love for you to leave a rating and a review.
We'll see you next time.